Question 1. The assessment process reveals that a highly qualified candidate for a critical role at Zhejiang Chint Electrics has provided impressive credentials. However, the hiring manager is under significant pressure to fill the position immediately and is considering expediting the process by relying heavily on the candidate's self-reported information and a brief informal chat, bypassing formal reference checks and a detailed background verification, which approach best aligns with professional hiring standards and regulatory compliance for Zhejiang Chint Electrics. Option A. Conduct thorough reference checks and a comprehensive background verification, even if it slightly delays the hiring timeline, to ensure the candidate meets all objective criteria and complies with Zhejiang Chint Electric's policies and relevant Chinese labor laws. Option B. Accept the candidate's self-reported qualifications at face value and proceed with hiring, as formal verification can be completed after the candidate has started employment. Option C. Proceed with the hiring decision based on the candidate's strong self-reported qualifications and the informal chat, prioritizing speed to meet the urgent hiring need. Option D. Hire the candidate based on a personal recommendation from a trusted colleague, assuming their judgment is sufficient to bypass formal assessment procedures. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the hiring decision based on the candidate's strong self-reported qualifications and the informal chat, prioritizing speed to meet the urgent hiring need. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure compliance with Zhejiang Chint Electric's internal hiring policies and relevant Chinese labor laws. The pressure to fill a position quickly can lead to overlooking critical due diligence, which could result in hiring an unqualified candidate or violating regulatory requirements. Careful judgment is required to balance the urgency of the hiring need with the imperative of a thorough and ethical assessment process. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the candidate's qualifications against the job requirements and a verification of their provided information through appropriate channels, such as reference checks and background screenings, in line with Zhejiang Chint Electric's established hiring protocols and Chinese labor law. This ensures that the hiring decision is based on merit, objective criteria, and compliance with all applicable regulations, thereby mitigating risks of poor performance, legal challenges, and reputational damage. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that bypasses standard verification procedures due to time constraints is professionally unacceptable. This failure to conduct due diligence, even under pressure, violates the principle of hiring based on verified qualifications and could lead to the selection of an unsuitable candidate. It also risks non-compliance with any specific background check requirements mandated by Zhejiang Chint Electric's or Chinese labor regulations, potentially exposing the company to legal liabilities. An approach that relies solely on the candidate's self-reported information without independent verification is also professionally flawed. This overlooks the possibility of unintentional inaccuracies or deliberate misrepresentations, undermining the integrity of the hiring process. It fails to adhere to best practices in recruitment and could result in hiring someone who does not meet the essential criteria, contrary to the company's stated requirements and potentially Chinese employment law principles regarding accurate representation. An approach that prioritizes personal acquaintance over objective assessment is ethically and professionally unsound. While personal relationships can sometimes be a positive indicator, they should not supersede a rigorous, merit-based evaluation process. This approach introduces bias, potentially leading to the exclusion of more qualified candidates and violating the principles of fair and equal opportunity in hiring, which are implicitly or explicitly part of Chinese labor law and company policy. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established policies and legal frameworks. This involves 1. Understanding the specific requirements of the role and the company's hiring policies. 2. Conducting a thorough and objective assessment of all candidates, utilizing verified information. 3. Identifying and mitigating any potential conflicts of interest or biases. 4. Ensuring compliance with all relevant labor laws and regulations. 5. Documenting the entire process to maintain transparency and accountability. When faced with time pressures, professionals must advocate for sufficient time to complete these essential steps, rather than compromising the integrity of the hiring process. Question 2. The audit findings indicate that Zhejiang Chint Electrics may be exceeding permissible discharge limits for a specific industrial effluent, potentially impacting local water quality. Which of the following approaches best addresses this critical situation? Option A. Conduct a thorough investigation of the audit findings, engage relevant environmental compliance teams, and develop a comprehensive corrective action plan aligned with Chinese environmental regulations. Option B. Immediately implement cost-saving measures in the wastewater treatment process to offset potential future fines. Option C. Prioritize meeting production targets and defer a detailed investigation of the audit findings until the next scheduled maintenance period. Option D. Dismiss the audit findings as a potential misinterpretation by the auditors and continue current operational practices. The correct answer is B. Immediately implement cost-saving measures in the wastewater treatment process to offset potential future fines. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires Zhejiang Chint Electrics to balance the immediate need for operational efficiency with the long-term implications of its environmental impact. The audit findings highlight a potential non-compliance issue, which, if not addressed appropriately, could lead to significant reputational damage, regulatory penalties, and operational disruptions. The pressure to maintain production levels while also ensuring environmental responsibility necessitates careful judgment and a robust decision-making process. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation into the audit findings, followed by the development and implementation of a corrective action plan that aligns with Zhejiang Chint Electric's environmental policies and relevant Chinese environmental regulations. This approach is correct because it prioritizes understanding the root cause of the potential non-compliance before taking action. It demonstrates a commitment to regulatory adherence and responsible corporate citizenship. By engaging with relevant internal departments and potentially external experts, the company can ensure that the corrective measures are effective, sustainable, and compliant with all applicable laws and standards, thereby mitigating risks and fostering long-term environmental stewardship. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction without a comprehensive assessment of the environmental impact risks regulatory non-compliance and potential future liabilities. It fails to address the root cause of the audit findings and may lead to superficial fixes that do not resolve the underlying environmental issues, potentially violating Chinese environmental protection laws and corporate social responsibility principles. An approach that delays addressing the audit findings due to production pressures ignores the potential for escalating problems and increased penalties. This reactive stance can lead to significant reputational damage and legal repercussions if the environmental issues are discovered by regulatory bodies or the public, contravening the principles of proactive environmental management and transparency expected under Chinese environmental regulations. An approach that dismisses the audit findings without proper investigation assumes the findings are erroneous without due diligence. This can lead to continued noncompliance, exposing Zhejiang Chint Electrics to severe penalties, operational shutdowns, and a loss of public trust, directly contradicting the spirit and letter of Chinese environmental laws that mandate reporting and remediation of environmental issues. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Zhejiang Chint Electrics should adopt a systematic approach to addressing audit findings. This involves 1. Acknowledging and thoroughly understanding the audit report. 2. Initiating an internal investigation to verify the findings and identify root causes. 3. Consulting relevant internal stakeholders, e.g., environmental compliance operations, legal and potentially external environmental consultants. 4. Developing a detailed corrective action plan with clear timelines, responsibilities, and measurable outcomes. 5. Implementing the plan and monitoring its effectiveness. 6. Communicating progress and outcomes to relevant parties. This structured process ensures that decisions are informed, compliant, and aligned with the company's commitment to environmental responsibility and regulatory adherence. Question 3. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a proposed modification to the manufacturing process at Zhejiang Chint Electric's facility may lead to increased energy consumption and potentially alter waste stream composition. Which of the following approaches best addresses the potential impact of this modification? Option A. proceed with the modification immediately to capitalize on anticipated production efficiencies, deferring any formal assessment until operational issues arise. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive environmental and safety impact assessment, consulting relevant Chinese environmental protection laws and internal safety protocols to identify and mitigate any non-compliance risks before implementing the modification. Option C. Implement the modification based on the assumption that current waste management systems are adequate and that any increase in energy consumption will be absorbed by existing infrastructure. Option D. Prioritize the modification based on its potential to reduce immediate production costs, with a secondary consideration for environmental and safety impacts if mandated by external auditors. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive environmental and safety impact assessment, consulting relevant Chinese environmental protection laws and internal safety protocols to identify and mitigate any non-compliance risks before implementing the modification. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the company's immediate operational needs with long-term compliance and ethical considerations, specifically within the context of Zhejiang Chint Electric's operational environment and relevant Chinese regulations. A hasty decision could lead to significant legal repercussions, reputational damage, and potential safety hazards. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any operational adjustments are made in a manner that upholds the integrity of Zhejiang Chint Electric's compliance framework. The correct approach involves a thorough impact assessment that prioritizes identifying potential regulatory noncompliance and environmental risks before implementing any changes. This aligns with the principles of proactive risk management and adherence to Chinese environmental protection laws and company-specific operational guidelines. By systematically evaluating the potential consequences, Zhejiang Chint Electrics can ensure that any proposed operational adjustments are both effective and compliant, thereby safeguarding its legal standing and corporate responsibility. An approach that bypasses a formal impact assessment and proceeds with operational changes based on anecdotal evidence or immediate cost-saving pressures is ethically and regulatorily flawed. This could lead to violations of environmental regulations, such as those concerning emissions or waste disposal, which carry substantial penalties under Chinese law. Furthermore, neglecting a comprehensive risk evaluation might overlook potential safety hazards for employees and the surrounding community, violating workplace safety standards and corporate duty of care. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on short-term financial gains without considering the broader implications, demonstrates a lack of strategic foresight and a disregard for sustainable business practices, which are increasingly emphasized in Chinese corporate governance. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with a clear understanding of the regulatory landscape relevant to Zhejiang Chint Electric's operations in China. This involves consulting relevant environmental protection laws, safety regulations, and internal company policies. The process should then involve a systematic impact assessment, engaging relevant stakeholders, e.g., environmental compliance officers, safety managers, production leads, and documenting all findings and decisions. When faced with operational pressures, the decision-making framework should always prioritize compliance and safety, seeking solutions that achieve operational goals without compromising these fundamental requirements. Question 4. Stakeholder feedback indicates that Zhejiang Chint Electric's recent operational changes may have unintended consequences for the local environment and community well-being. Which approach to assessing the impact of these changes would best align with responsible corporate practice and regulatory expectations? Option A. Rely on informal discussions and anecdotal evidence from a few key employees to gauge the overall impact of the operational changes. Option B. Prioritize the feedback and concerns of the largest institutional investors when conducting the impact assessment, as their financial interests are paramount. Option C. Conduct a thorough impact assessment that quantifies environmental and social effects, identifies affected stakeholder groups, and proposes mitigation and enhancement strategies, aligning with principles of sustainable development and transparent reporting. Option D. Focus the impact assessment primarily on the immediate financial benefits and costs to Zhejiang Chint Electrics, as this is the most direct measure of business success. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough impact assessment that quantifies environmental and social effects, identifies affected stakeholder groups, and proposes mitigation and enhancement strategies, aligning with principles of sustainable development and transparent reporting. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because Zhejiang Chint Electrics, as a publicly listed company, must navigate the complex interplay between operational efficiency, stakeholder expectations, and regulatory compliance. The feedback highlights a potential disconnect between internal processes and external perceptions, requiring a nuanced approach to impact assessment that considers both tangible and intangible consequences. Careful judgment is essential to ensure that the chosen impact assessment methodology is robust, transparent, and aligned with the principles of good corporate governance and relevant Chinese regulations governing environmental, social, and governance-esque reporting and business conduct. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and integrated impact assessment that considers the full spectrum of potential effects on all relevant stakeholders, including the environment, employees, customers, and the wider community. This approach is justified by the need to comply with evolving ESG disclosure requirements and to maintain stakeholder trust. Specifically, it aligns with the spirit of regulations that encourage responsible corporate behavior and transparent reporting, even if specific detailed mandates for this exact scenario are not explicitly detailed in a single document. The focus on identifying both positive and negative impacts and proposing mitigation or enhancement strategies demonstrates a commitment to sustainable business practices and proactive risk management, which are increasingly expected by regulators and investors in China. An approach that focuses solely on immediate financial implications would be ethically and regulatorily deficient. It fails to acknowledge the broader societal and environmental responsibilities of Zhejiang Chint Electrics, potentially leading to reputational damage and noncompliance with emerging ESG standards. Similarly, an approach that prioritizes only the feedback from a single dominant stakeholder group, such as major shareholders, risks overlooking critical issues raised by other stakeholders, such as employees or local communities, whose concerns are also relevant to long-term sustainability and regulatory adherence. An approach that relies on anecdotal evidence without a structured methodology would lack the rigor required for credible impact assessment and could lead to misinformed decision-making, potentially exposing the company to regulatory scrutiny and stakeholder dissatisfaction. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the scope and objectives of the impact assessment. This involves identifying all relevant stakeholders and the potential impacts on them, drawing upon both quantitative and qualitative data. The framework should then involve selecting an appropriate assessment methodology that is both comprehensive and proportionate to the scale of the potential impacts. Crucially, the process must include mechanisms for stakeholder engagement and feedback, ensuring that the assessment is informed by diverse perspectives. Finally, the findings should be translated into actionable strategies for mitigation, enhancement, and ongoing monitoring, with transparent reporting to relevant stakeholders and regulatory bodies. Question 5. Stakeholder feedback indicates that the proposed expansion of a manufacturing facility by Zhejiang Chint Electrics may have significant environmental implications for the surrounding region. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation in accordance with Zhejiang's environmental protection laws and ethical business practices? Option A. Proceed with the expansion as planned, assuming that any environmental concerns raised by stakeholders are exaggerated, and address any potential issues only if formal regulatory action is initiated by Zhejiang authorities. Option B. Engage in limited communication with key stakeholders, providing only the information that is legally required, and focus primarily on minimizing the perceived environmental footprint to avoid regulatory delays, rather than conducting a full impact study. Option C. Initiate a preliminary environmental review that focuses only on the most obvious and easily quantifiable impacts, deferring a more detailed assessment until after the expansion is largely complete and operational. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive environmental impact assessment that thoroughly evaluates all potential ecological effects, consults with local communities and environmental experts, and develops robust mitigation strategies, all while adhering to the specific reporting requirements mandated by Zhejiang's environmental regulatory framework. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive environmental impact assessment that thoroughly evaluates all potential ecological effects, consults with local communities and environmental experts, and develops robust mitigation strategies, all while adhering to the specific reporting requirements mandated by Zhejiang's environmental regulatory framework. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because Zhejiang Chint Electrics, as a publicly listed company, must navigate the complex interplay between operational efficiency and regulatory compliance, particularly concerning environmental impact. Stakeholder feedback, especially from local communities and environmental groups, carries significant weight and can trigger regulatory scrutiny. The challenge lies in balancing the company's immediate business needs with its long-term sustainability obligations and public perception, all within the framework of Zhejiang's environmental protection laws and relevant industry guidelines. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent engagement with stakeholders, coupled with a thorough impact assessment that adheres strictly to the environmental regulations of Zhejiang province. This approach is professionally sound because it demonstrates corporate responsibility, fosters trust, and allows Zhejiang Chint Electrics to identify and mitigate potential environmental risks before they escalate into compliance issues or reputational damage. By conducting a comprehensive assessment and openly communicating findings and mitigation plans, the company aligns its actions with the spirit and letter of Zhejiang's environmental laws, which prioritize sustainable development and pollution prevention. This also preempts potential penalties or operational disruptions that could arise from noncompliance. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate cost savings by downplaying potential environmental impacts would fail to meet regulatory requirements. Zhejiang's environmental laws mandate thorough assessments of projects that could affect the environment, and any attempt to circumvent this process, even for perceived economic benefit, constitutes a serious regulatory failure. Such an approach risks significant fines, legal challenges, and damage to Zhejiang Chint Electric's reputation, potentially leading to a loss of social license to operate. Another incorrect approach, which involves delaying the environmental impact assessment until external pressure mounts, is also professionally unsound. This reactive stance suggests a lack of commitment to environmental stewardship and can be interpreted as an attempt to avoid scrutiny. Regulatory bodies in Zhejiang are likely to view such delays unfavorably, potentially leading to stricter oversight and more punitive measures. Furthermore, it misses the opportunity to integrate environmental considerations early in the project lifecycle, which is often more cost-effective and leads to better outcomes. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on meeting minimum legal requirements without considering broader stakeholder concerns or best practices would be insufficient. While technically compliant, it might not address the underlying environmental sensitivities raised by stakeholders, leaving Zhejiang Chint Electrics vulnerable to future criticism and potential regulatory adjustments. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a forward-thinking perspective that integrates regulatory compliance with ethical considerations and proactive risk management, ensuring long-term sustainability and stakeholder confidence. Question 6. Stakeholder feedback indicates that recent operational changes at Zhejiang Chint Electric's manufacturing facilities may have unintended environmental consequences. The company is considering implementing a new production method to increase efficiency, but some community groups have raised concerns about potential increased emissions. How should Zhejiang Chint Electrics proceed to ensure compliance with Chinese environmental regulations and maintain stakeholder trust? Option A. Immediately implement the new production method to capitalize on efficiency gains, while privately monitoring emissions for any significant deviations from current levels. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive, independent environmental impact assessment that consults with local stakeholders and evaluates the proposed changes against all relevant Chinese environmental protection laws and standards before making a decision. Option C. Conduct a limited internal review focusing solely on the cost-saving aspects of the new method, and only address environmental concerns if regulatory bodies initiate an inquiry. Option D. Dismiss the community concerns as unfounded, citing the company's historical commitment to environmental responsibility and proceeding with the new production method without further investigation. The correct answer is A. Immediately implement the new production method to capitalize on efficiency gains, while privately monitoring emissions for any significant deviations from current levels. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the need to balance stakeholder expectations with the company's commitment to ethical and regulatory compliance. Zhejiang Chint Electrics, like any responsible corporation, must navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure that its operational decisions are not unduly influenced by external pressures that could compromise its integrity or violate relevant Chinese regulations governing business conduct and environmental protection. Careful judgment is required to uphold the company's reputation and long-term sustainability. The correct approach involves conducting a thorough and objective impact assessment that considers all relevant environmental, social, and economic factors, in line with China's environmental protection laws and corporate social responsibility guidelines. This assessment should be transparent and involve consultation with affected stakeholders, ensuring that any proposed changes to manufacturing processes at Zhejiang Chint Electrics are evaluated against established legal and ethical standards. This upholds the principle of responsible corporate citizenship and adherence to the law. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize immediate cost savings or stakeholder demands without a comprehensive evaluation of potential negative consequences. This could lead to violations of environmental regulations, such as those concerning emissions or waste disposal, potentially resulting in fines, legal action, and reputational damage for Zhejiang Chint Electrics. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss stakeholder concerns outright, failing to engage in good faith dialogue. This demonstrates a lack of respect for community rights and could escalate into significant public relations issues, undermining trust and potentially leading to regulatory scrutiny. Finally, selectively gathering data to support a predetermined outcome would be a severe ethical and regulatory breach, indicating a lack of integrity and a disregard for objective analysis. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all relevant stakeholders and their concerns. This is followed by a comprehensive review of applicable Chinese laws and regulations. An objective impact assessment, considering both positive and negative outcomes, should then be conducted. Finally, decisions should be made based on the findings of this assessment, prioritizing compliance, ethical conduct, and long-term sustainability for Zhejiang Chint Electrics. Question 7. Process analysis reveals that Zhejiang Chint Electrics is exploring new suppliers to reduce manufacturing costs. One potential supplier offers significantly lower prices than current partners, but their operational practices and compliance certification are not immediately transparent. What is the most responsible approach for Zhejiang Chint Electrics to take in evaluating this new supplier? Option A. Conduct thorough due diligence, including independent verification of the supplier's compliance with relevant Chinese labor, environmental, and safety regulations, as well as their financial stability and ethical track record. Option B. Negotiate a lower price with existing suppliers to match the new offer, without investigating the new supplier's practices. Option C. Proceed with the new supplier immediately to realize cost savings, assuming their lower prices reflect efficient operations. Option D. Accept the supplier's self-attested compliance documents at face value and prioritize the cost reduction. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the new supplier immediately to realize cost savings, assuming their lower prices reflect efficient operations. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires Zhejiang Chint Electrics to balance the immediate need for cost reduction with its long-term commitment to ethical sourcing and regulatory compliance. The pressure to cut expenses can lead to overlooking potential risks associated with less scrupulous suppliers, potentially jeopardizing the company's reputation and exposing it to legal and financial repercussions. Careful judgment is required to ensure that cost-saving measures do not compromise ethical standards or violate relevant Chinese regulations governing supply chain practices. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a thorough due diligence process on potential new suppliers, even those offering significant cost savings. This includes verifying their compliance with environmental, labor, and safety standards, as well as their adherence to Chinese contract law and any specific industry regulations applicable to Zhejiang Chint Electrics. This proactive risk assessment ensures that cost reductions are achieved without introducing unacceptable ethical or legal liabilities, aligning with the principles of responsible corporate governance and sustainable business practices mandated by Chinese law and expected by stakeholders. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that prioritizes immediate cost savings without verifying supplier compliance is ethically flawed and legally risky. It ignores the potential for suppliers to engage in practices that violate Chinese labor laws, environmental regulations, or intellectual property rights, which could lead to significant fines, reputational damage, and operational disruptions for Zhejiang Chint Electrics. An approach that relies solely on the supplier's self-declaration of compliance without independent verification is insufficient. While self-declaration is a starting point, it does not absolve Zhejiang Chint Electrics of its responsibility to ensure that its supply chain operates ethically and legally. This could lead to unknowingly partnering with non-compliant entities, thereby breaching regulatory obligations. An approach that focuses only on the lowest price without considering the supplier's operational capacity and ethical track record is short-sighted. Suppliers offering unusually low prices may be cutting corners in critical areas such as worker safety, environmental protection, or product quality, all of which are subject to Chinese regulations and can have severe consequences if compromised. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Zhejiang Chint Electrics should adopt a decision-making framework that integrates risk management with ethical considerations. This involves 1. Clearly defining compliance requirements based on Chinese laws and industry standards. 2. Establishing a robust supplier vetting process that includes independent verification of compliance. 3. Evaluating suppliers not just on price, but also on their ethical conduct, operational stability, and long-term sustainability. 4. Maintaining ongoing monitoring of supplier performance to ensure continued adherence to standards. This systematic approach mitigates risks and upholds Zhejiang Chint Electric's commitment to responsible business practices. Question 8. Quality control measures reveal a potential manufacturing defect in a key component used in several Zhejiang Chint Electric's products. The defect appears to be intermittent, and its full impact on product safety and performance is not yet definitively understood. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for Zhejiang Chint Electric's quality and compliance departments? Option A. Initiate a comprehensive internal investigation to ascertain the nature, scope, and potential impact of the defect, while simultaneously reviewing relevant Chinese product safety and disclosure regulations to determine immediate reporting obligations. Option B. Immediately halt all production and distribution of affected products to prevent any potential harm to consumers, regardless of the confirmed severity of the defect. Option C. Publicly announce the potential defect to customers and stakeholders to ensure transparency, even before a full internal investigation is completed or regulatory reporting requirements are assessed. Option D. Continue production and distribution as normal while a long-term solution is being developed, with the intention of reporting the issue to authorities only once a permanent fix is in place. The correct answer is A. Initiate a comprehensive internal investigation to ascertain the nature, scope, and potential impact of the defect, while simultaneously reviewing relevant Chinese product safety and disclosure regulations to determine immediate reporting obligations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need to address a potential product defect with the company's obligation to adhere to regulatory reporting timelines and procedures. Zhejiang Chint Electrics, as a publicly listed entity, must ensure its internal processes are robust enough to identify and rectify issues promptly, while also complying with the disclosure requirements of relevant Chinese securities and product safety regulations. The challenge lies in determining the appropriate level of internal investigation and external communication before a definitive conclusion is reached, to avoid premature disclosure that could mislead stakeholders or, conversely, delay necessary reporting and risk regulatory penalties. The correct approach involves a systematic internal investigation to confirm the nature and extent of the defect, followed by timely reporting to relevant regulatory bodies, in accordance with the Zhejiang Chint Electric's established internal compliance policies and Chinese laws governing product safety and disclosure. This approach ensures that any necessary corrective actions are based on verified information and that regulatory obligations are met proactively, thereby protecting both consumers and the company's reputation and legal standing. Adherence to the specific reporting thresholds and timelines mandated by Chinese regulations is paramount. An incorrect approach would be to immediately halt all production and distribution without a thorough internal assessment. This could lead to unnecessary business disruption and financial losses if the issue is minor or isolated. It also bypasses the established procedures for defect verification and reporting, potentially failing to meet the specific information requirements of regulatory bodies. Another incorrect approach would be to delay reporting to the relevant authorities until a complete, long-term solution is implemented. This risks violating disclosure regulations, which often have strict timelines for reporting material issues, even if a permanent fix is still in development. Such a delay could result in fines, reputational damage, and loss of investor confidence. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to communicate the potential defect externally to customers or the public before confirming the issue internally and reporting it to regulators. This premature disclosure can cause undue alarm, damage brand trust, and may not align with the information required by regulatory bodies for their own assessment and guidance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a structured, evidence-based approach. This involves 1. Immediate internal escalation of the quality control finding to the relevant technical and compliance teams. 2. Initiating a rapid but thorough internal investigation to confirm the defect, its scope, and potential impact. 3. Consulting internal compliance policies and relevant Chinese laws to determine reporting obligations and timelines. 4. Preparing and submitting timely and accurate reports to regulatory authorities as required. 5. Developing and implementing a corrective action plan based on verified findings. 6. Communicating appropriately with stakeholders once regulatory requirements are met and a clear plan is in place. Question 9. The performance metrics show a significant downturn in Zhejiang Chint Electric's quarterly revenue, potentially impacting investor confidence. What is the most appropriate course of action for the management team to address this situation while adhering to regulatory requirements? Option A. Temporarily adjust accounting estimates to recognize certain anticipated future revenues in the current quarter, thereby offsetting the reported revenue decline and presenting a more stable financial picture. Option B. Conduct a thorough internal review of the factors contributing to the revenue decline, consult with legal and compliance teams regarding disclosure obligations, and prepare a transparent report for stakeholders that outlines the challenges and proposed mitigation strategies. Option C. Issue a press release highlighting only the positive aspects of the company's performance, such as growth in specific niche markets, while downplaying or omitting the overall revenue decrease. Option D. Immediately implement aggressive cost-cutting measures and reallocate marketing budgets to focus solely on high-margin products, without disclosing the full extent of the revenue decline to the public until the next annual report. Correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough internal review of the factors contributing to the revenue decline, consult with legal and compliance teams regarding disclosure obligations, and prepare a transparent report for stakeholders that outlines the challenges and proposed mitigation strategies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate financial performance with its long-term ethical and regulatory obligations. Zhejiang Chint Electrics, as a publicly listed entity, is subject to specific regulations governing its financial reporting and disclosure practices. Misrepresenting performance metrics, even with the intention of short-term gain or to avoid negative market reaction, can lead to severe legal and reputational consequences. The core of the challenge lies in discerning between legitimate performance enhancement strategies and deceptive practices that violate regulatory frameworks. The correct approach involves a thorough and transparent assessment of the performance metrics, identifying any discrepancies or areas of concern, and then developing a strategy that aligns with the Zhejiang Chint Electric's regulatory obligations and ethical standards. This includes understanding the specific accounting standards and disclosure requirements applicable in China. The justification for this approach is rooted in the principle of transparency and compliance. Regulatory bodies in China, such as the China Securities Regulatory Commission, CSRC, mandate accurate and timely financial reporting. Any action that intentionally misleads stakeholders about the company's true financial health would be a direct violation of these regulations, potentially leading to fines, sanctions, and damage to investor confidence. Ethical considerations also dictate that management should act in the best interest of all stakeholders, which includes providing truthful information. An incorrect approach would be to manipulate or selectively present performance metrics to create a more favorable impression. This could involve aggressive accounting practices that stretch the interpretation of accounting standards, delaying the recognition of expenses, or overstating revenues. Such actions would be considered fraudulent or misleading under Chinese securities laws and corporate governance guidelines. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the negative performance metrics and proceed with business as usual without addressing the underlying issues. This demonstrates a lack of accountability and foresight, potentially exacerbating the problems and leading to more significant future challenges. Furthermore, failing to consult with legal and compliance departments before making decisions about financial reporting would be a significant ethical and regulatory oversight, as these departments are responsible for ensuring adherence to all applicable laws and guidelines. Professionals facing such situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes integrity and compliance. This involves 1. Understanding the regulatory landscape. Familiarize oneself with all relevant Chinese laws, regulations, and CSRC guidelines pertaining to financial reporting and disclosure for listed companies. 2. Objective assessment. Conduct an unbiased evaluation of the performance metrics, seeking external validation if necessary. 3. Consultation. Engage with legal, compliance, and internal audit teams to assess the implications of the metrics and potential courses of action. 4. Ethical consideration. Evaluate each potential strategy against ethical principles and the company's stated values. 5. Transparent communication. Ensure that all disclosures are accurate, complete, and timely, even if they present unfavorable news. Question 10. The control framework reveals that Zhejiang Chint Electrics is preparing for a significant new product launch that is expected to generate substantial revenue, but also carries potential warranty and recall risks. Management is eager to present a strong financial performance for the upcoming reporting period, which approach best ensures compliance with the regulatory framework governing financial reporting for Zhejiang Chint Electrics. Option A. Defer the recognition of potential warranty and recall expenses until they are definitively incurred, to avoid negatively impacting the current period's profitability. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of the new product launch on Zhejiang Chint Electric's financial statements, ensuring all potential liabilities and revenue recognition are accounted for in accordance with Chinese accounting standards and relevant securities regulations. Option C. Focus the financial reporting primarily on the projected revenue growth from the new product, with minimal emphasis on potential risks and liabilities. Option D. Interpret accounting standards in a manner that maximizes reported profits for the current period, focusing on the immediate revenue generation from the new product. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of the new product launch on Zhejiang Chint Electric's financial statements, ensuring all potential liabilities and revenue recognition are accounted for in accordance with Chinese accounting standards and relevant securities regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential conflict between business objectives and regulatory compliance. Zhejiang Chint Electrics, as a publicly listed company, is subject to stringent regulations regarding financial reporting and disclosure. The pressure to meet performance targets can create an environment where shortcuts or misinterpretations of accounting standards might be considered, posing a significant risk to the company's integrity and legal standing. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all financial reporting adheres strictly to the applicable regulatory framework. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of the impact of the new product launch on Zhejiang Chint Electric's financial statements, strictly adhering to the accounting standards and disclosure requirements mandated by Chinese accounting laws and relevant securities regulations. This ensures transparency, accuracy, and compliance, thereby safeguarding the company's reputation and avoiding potential legal repercussions. It prioritizes the integrity of financial reporting over short-term performance pressures. An incorrect approach that involves selectively interpreting accounting standards to present a more favorable financial picture would constitute a serious breach of regulatory requirements. This could lead to misrepresentation of the company's financial health, misleading investors and stakeholders, and potentially violating laws related to financial disclosure and accounting practices in China. Another incorrect approach, such as delaying the recognition of potential liabilities associated with the product launch to artificially boost current period profits, would also be a violation. This practice, known as aggressive accounting or even fraudulent accounting, undermines the principle of true and fair presentation of financial information and contravenes accounting standards that require timely recognition of all foreseeable obligations. A professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the relevant regulatory framework, including Chinese accounting standards (CAS), and any specific guidelines issued by the China Securities Regulatory Commission (CSRC) for listed companies. Professionals should consult with internal legal and accounting experts, and if necessary, seek external professional advice to ensure accurate and compliant financial reporting. The principle of prudence and the requirement for a true and fair view should always guide decisions, even under pressure to achieve business targets. Question 11. Market research demonstrates a growing demand for smart home devices in the region where Zhejiang Chint Electrics operates. To capitalize on this trend, the company is considering introducing a new line of interconnected smart plugs and lighting systems. What is the most appropriate approach for Zhejiang Chint Electrics to take to ensure a responsible and compliant product launch? Option A. Prioritize speed to market by launching the products quickly and addressing any regulatory issues that may arise after the initial sales period. Option B. Proceed with the product launch based on the positive market research, assuming that existing general electrical product regulations will cover the new smart devices. Option C. Focus solely on the technical innovation and competitive pricing of the new smart devices, deferring detailed impact analysis until after the products are established. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment, evaluating potential regulatory compliance, environmental effects, and market reception according to Chinese laws and industry guidelines. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment, evaluating potential regulatory compliance, environmental effects, and market reception according to Chinese laws and industry guidelines. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Zhejiang Chint Electrics due to the need to balance market expansion with adherence to the specific regulatory framework governing its operations within China. The company must navigate the complexities of introducing new products while ensuring full compliance with relevant Chinese laws and industry guidelines, particularly those related to product safety, environmental impact, and fair competition. A thorough impact assessment is crucial to identify potential risks and opportunities, ensuring that Zhejiang Chint Electrics acts responsibly and ethically. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and proactive impact assessment that considers all relevant Chinese regulations and guidelines. This approach is right because it demonstrates a commitment to legal compliance and responsible corporate citizenship. By systematically evaluating the potential effects of new product introductions on consumers, the environment, and the market, Zhejiang Chint Electrics can identify and mitigate risks before they materialize. This proactive stance aligns with the principles of good governance and risk management expected of a reputable company operating within China's regulatory landscape. It ensures that product launches are not only commercially viable, but also legally sound and ethically defensible, safeguarding the company's reputation and long-term sustainability. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with product introductions without a thorough impact assessment, relying solely on internal assumptions about market acceptance or perceived regulatory loopholes. Failure to conduct a proper assessment constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical lapse. It exposes Zhejiang Chint Electrics to potential fines, legal challenges, and reputational damage if the new products violate any Chinese laws or regulations. Another incorrect approach would be to conduct a superficial assessment that only considers immediate commercial benefits, neglecting potential environmental or social impacts. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the broader responsibilities of a corporate entity. Such an approach could lead to unintended consequences, such as product recalls, consumer complaints, or environmental penalties, all of which undermine the company's credibility and operational integrity. Professionals at Zhejiang Chint Electrics should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical considerations alongside commercial objectives. This involves establishing clear internal procedures for product development and launch, including mandatory impact assessment phases. When faced with decisions about new product introductions, professionals should ask, does this product comply with all applicable Chinese laws and regulations? What are the potential environmental and social impacts, and how can they be mitigated? Have all stakeholders been considered? By consistently applying this framework, Zhejiang Chint Electrics can ensure that its growth strategies are both successful and responsible. Question 12. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent, albeit minor, exceedance of a specific pollutant discharge limit for Zhejiang Chint Electric's manufacturing facility. The exceedance has been observed over the past 3 operational cycles. Option A. Temporarily adjust the monitoring system's calibration to bring the readings within the acceptable limits, pending a more thorough review of operational processes. Option B. Continue normal operations, assuming the exceedance is within acceptable statistical variance and will self-correct, while documenting the readings for future reference. Option C. Initiate an immediate internal investigation to identify the root cause of the pollutant discharge exceedance and implement corrective actions in strict adherence to Zhejiang's environmental protection laws and regulations. Option D. Immediately halt all production processes until the cause of the exceedance is definitively identified and resolved, regardless of the operational and financial implications. The correct answer is C. Initiate an immediate internal investigation to identify the root cause of the pollutant discharge exceedance and implement corrective actions in strict adherence to Zhejiang's environmental protection laws and regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's operational efficiency and compliance obligations with the potential impact on environmental standards. Zhejiang Chint Electrics, as a manufacturing entity, operates within a regulatory environment that prioritizes environmental protection. The monitoring system's data, indicating a deviation from established environmental parameters, necessitates a prompt and responsible response. Failure to address such deviations can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and harm to the environment. Careful judgment is required to determine the most appropriate course of action, considering both immediate operational needs and long-term sustainability. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation into the root cause of the deviation and implementing corrective actions in accordance with Zhejiang's environmental protection laws and regulations. This demonstrates a commitment to compliance and responsible corporate citizenship. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of environmental stewardship mandated by Chinese environmental law, which requires companies to monitor their emissions and discharges, report any exceedances, and take immediate steps to rectify the situation. This proactive and compliant response mitigates risks and upholds the company's integrity. An incorrect approach would be to ignore or downplay the monitoring system's findings. This could stem from a desire to avoid immediate costs associated with remediation or potential production halts. However, such an approach directly violates environmental regulations that mandate reporting and corrective action for deviations. It also creates a significant ethical failure by prioritizing short-term gains over environmental responsibility and public well-being. Another incorrect approach might be to implement superficial fixes without identifying the underlying cause. This is also problematic as it fails to address the systemic issue, leading to recurring problems and continued noncompliance, which is a breach of the spirit and letter of environmental protection laws. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with acknowledging the data from the monitoring system. This should be followed by an immediate internal review to understand the nature and extent of the deviation. Based on this understanding, a plan for investigation and corrective action should be developed, ensuring it aligns with all applicable Zhejiang environmental laws and company policies. Communication with relevant internal departments and, if necessary, external regulatory bodies should be a priority throughout the process. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, compliant, and ethically sound. Question 13. Stakeholder feedback indicates that Zhejiang Chint Electric's recent product update has inadvertently created a barrier for a segment of its customer base, leading to frustration and potential loss of business. What is the most appropriate initial step for Zhejiang Chint Electrics to take in addressing this feedback? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to understand the nature and extent of the barrier. Gather objective data on customer experiences and consult relevant internal guidelines and external regulations to inform potential solutions. Option B. Focus on marketing efforts to highlight the benefits of the new product update, assuming the feedback represents a minority of customers who are resistant to change. Option C. Immediately revert the product update to its previous version to appease the dissatisfied stakeholders and prevent further negative feedback. Option D. Issue a public statement acknowledging the feedback and promising to investigate, without initiating any immediate internal review or data collection. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to understand the nature and extent of the barrier, gather objective data on customer experiences, and consult relevant internal guidelines and external regulations to inform potential solutions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the need to balance stakeholder expectations with the company's ethical obligations and regulatory compliance, specifically within the context of Zhejiang Chint Electric's operational environment. The core difficulty lies in interpreting and acting upon feedback that may be subjective, potentially biased, or even misinformed, while ensuring that any response aligns with the company's commitment to transparency and responsible business practices as guided by relevant Chinese regulations and industry standards applicable to Zhejiang Chint Electrics. Careful judgment is required to discern the validity of feedback and to formulate a response that is both effective and ethically sound. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based assessment of the feedback. This entails gathering objective data, consulting relevant internal policies and external regulations, and engaging in constructive dialogue with the stakeholders who provided the feedback. The justification for this approach lies in its adherence to principles of good corporate governance and ethical conduct, which are increasingly emphasized in China's regulatory landscape. By conducting a thorough impact assessment, Zhejiang Chint Electrics demonstrates a commitment to understanding and addressing legitimate concerns, thereby fostering trust and maintaining its reputation. This aligns with the spirit of regulations promoting fair competition, consumer protection, and corporate social responsibility. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the feedback outright without investigation. This failure stems from a disregard for stakeholder concerns, which can lead to reputational damage and potential regulatory scrutiny. It also violates ethical principles of responsiveness and accountability. Another incorrect approach is to implement changes based solely on the feedback without a proper assessment of their feasibility, legality, or potential unintended consequences. This can result in operational disruptions, non-compliance with regulations, and a failure to address the root cause of the issue, if one exists. A third incorrect approach is to respond defensively or with a lack of transparency, which erodes trust and can escalate the situation. This is contrary to the growing emphasis on transparency and open communication in Chinese business practices. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding the context, gathering facts, evaluating options against regulatory and ethical standards, and communicating transparently. This involves active listening, critical analysis of information, and a commitment to finding solutions that are both practical and principled. Question 14. Upon reviewing the potential market impact of Zhejiang Chint Electric's upcoming new product launch, which approach best ensures compliance with relevant Chinese market regulations and promotes responsible business conduct? Option A. Focus primarily on the product's unique selling propositions and technological advancements, downplaying potential effects on existing market players and overall market saturation. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment by analyzing projected sales, customer migration, competitor responses, and overall market dynamics, ensuring alignment with China's anti-monopoly law and fair competition principles. Option C. Prioritize aggressive sales targets for the new product, assuming market demand will naturally absorb the offering without significant concern for competitor displacement. Option D. Rely on internal projections and optimistic forecasts from the sales team to gauge the product's market penetration, without extensive external data validation or regulatory review. Correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment by analyzing projected sales, customer migration, competitor responses, and overall market dynamics, ensuring alignment with China's anti-monopoly law and fair competition principles. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Zhejiang Chint Electric's employee tasked with assessing the impact of a new product launch on existing market share. The challenge lies in balancing the company's ambition for growth with the regulatory and ethical obligations to ensure fair competition and accurate market representation. Misjudging the impact could lead to regulatory scrutiny, damage to Zhejiang Chint Electric's reputation, and potentially unfair competitive practices. Careful judgment is required to ensure the assessment is both comprehensive and compliant with relevant Chinese regulations governing market conduct and fair competition. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough, data-driven impact assessment that considers both quantitative and qualitative factors. This includes analyzing projected sales figures, potential customer migration from existing products, competitor reactions, and the overall market dynamics. Crucially, this assessment must be conducted with an understanding of China's anti-monopoly law (AML) and related regulations that govern market dominance, abuse of dominant market position, and unfair competition. The aim is to proactively identify any potential issues that could be construed as anti-competitive or misleading, allowing Zhejiang Chint Electrics to adjust its strategy or provide necessary justifications to regulatory bodies. This approach demonstrates a commitment to responsible business practices and regulatory compliance, safeguarding the company's long-term interests. Incorrect approach is analysis, focusing solely on aggressive sales targets without a corresponding impact assessment risks, overlooking potential regulatory breaches. This approach prioritizes short-term gains over long-term compliance and market stability, which could lead to investigations under China's AML for potentially engaging in monopolistic practices or unfair competition if the new product significantly erodes competitor viability without legitimate justification. Ignoring competitor reactions and market saturation is another flawed approach. This demonstrates a lack of strategic foresight and an incomplete understanding of market dynamics. Such an oversight could result in an overestimation of the new product's success, leading to resource misallocation and potentially creating a situation where Zhejiang Chint Electric's actions are perceived as predatory or disruptive to market order, attracting regulatory attention. Relying on anecdotal evidence or internal optimism without rigorous data analysis is unprofessional and risky. Regulatory bodies in China, like the State Administration for Market Regulation, (SAMR), require evidence-based assessments. This approach lacks the substantiation needed to defend Zhejiang Chint Electric's market strategies if challenged, and it fails to provide a realistic picture of the product launch's true impact, potentially leading to unforeseen negative consequences. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Zhejiang Chint Electric should adopt a proactive and compliant approach to impact assessments. This involves 1. Understanding the relevant regulatory landscape. Familiarize oneself with China's anti-monopoly law and related guidelines concerning market impact and fair competition. 2. Data-driven analysis. Employ robust methodologies to gather and analyze both quantitative and qualitative data related to the product launch and its market implications. 3. Risk identification and mitigation. Proactively identify potential regulatory risks and develop strategies to mitigate them. 4. Ethical considerations. Ensure that the assessment and subsequent actions are conducted ethically, promoting fair competition and consumer welfare. 5. Seeking expert advice. If uncertainties arise regarding regulatory compliance or complex market dynamics, consult with legal and market experts. Question 15. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a proposed new product line by Zhejiang Chint Electrics may have unintended environmental consequences that could impact local communities. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation from an impact assessment perspective, adhering to principles of responsible corporate conduct? Option A. Commission a limited internal review of potential environmental risks, prioritizing cost-effectiveness and speed to market over extensive stakeholder consultation. Option B. Focus solely on the potential market demand and profitability of the new product line, deferring any environmental considerations until they become a direct legal mandate. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive environmental and social impact assessment, engaging with affected communities to understand their concerns and incorporating their feedback into the product development and rollout strategy. Option D. Proceed with the product launch as planned, assuming that any environmental issues will be addressed reactively if they arise and are formally reported. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive environmental and social impact assessment, engaging with affected communities to understand their concerns and incorporating their feedback into the product development and rollout strategy. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the need to balance stakeholder expectations with the company's ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. Zhejiang Chint Electrics, like any responsible corporation, must navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure transparency in its dealings. The core of the challenge lies in identifying and mitigating risks associated with information asymmetry and potential undue influence. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive impact assessment that considers all relevant stakeholders and potential consequences. This approach is ethically sound and aligns with principles of good corporate governance, which are increasingly emphasized in regulatory frameworks governing business conduct. By systematically evaluating the potential effects of a decision on various parties, including employees, customers, suppliers, and the broader community, Zhejiang Chint Electrics can make informed choices that uphold its integrity and long-term sustainability. This aligns with the spirit of regulations that promote fair dealing and responsible business practices. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss stakeholder feedback without thorough consideration. This demonstrates a lack of respect for those affected by the company's decisions and can lead to reputational damage and potential regulatory scrutiny. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize short-term financial gains over ethical considerations or long-term stakeholder relationships. This can create a culture of expediency that erodes trust and may violate implicit or explicit expectations of responsible corporate behavior. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on legal compliance without considering ethical implications can be insufficient, as ethical standards often extend beyond minimum legal requirements. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the context and identifying all relevant stakeholders. This should be followed by a thorough assessment of potential impacts, considering both positive and negative consequences. Ethical principles and regulatory requirements should then be applied to evaluate the options. Finally, a decision should be made that is not only legally compliant, but also ethically defensible and in the best interest of all parties involved, fostering trust and long-term value. Question 16. Stakeholder feedback indicates that Zhejiang Chint Electric's recent sustainability report, while highlighting significant investments in green technology, has been criticized for not fully detailing the environmental impact of its manufacturing processes in certain regions. Considering the regulatory framework governing listed companies in China, which approach to addressing this feedback is most professionally sound and compliant? Option A. Delay any further public statements or reports on environmental impact until a new, more favorable set of data can be collected, hoping the current criticism fades. Option B. Issue a public statement emphasizing the company's overall commitment to sustainability and its positive achievements, while downplaying the specific criticisms regarding incomplete impact details. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the sustainability report to identify any omissions or misrepresentations regarding environmental impacts, and then issue a supplementary report that provides a more complete and transparent account, including both positive and negative aspects, in accordance with CSRC disclosure requirements. Option D. Initiate an internal audit focused solely on identifying cost-saving opportunities related to environmental compliance, rather than on the accuracy of past disclosures. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the sustainability report to identify any omissions or misrepresentations regarding environmental impacts, and then issue a supplementary report that provides a more complete and transparent account, including both positive and negative aspects, in accordance with CSRC disclosure requirements. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because Zhejiang Chint Electrics, as a publicly listed company, must navigate the complex interplay between internal operational efficiency and external stakeholder expectations, particularly concerning environmental, social, and governance-esque disclosures. The challenge lies in balancing the desire for positive public perception with the imperative of accurate and compliant reporting, as mandated by relevant Chinese securities regulations and corporate governance guidelines. Misrepresenting or selectively disclosing information can lead to severe regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and loss of investor confidence. The correct approach involves a thorough and transparent impact assessment that considers all relevant stakeholders and adheres strictly to the disclosure requirements set forth by the China Securities Regulatory Commission, CSRC, and any applicable industry-specific environmental regulations in China. This approach ensures that Zhejiang Chint Electrics provides a comprehensive and truthful account of its environmental initiatives and their actual impact, thereby fulfilling its legal and ethical obligations. It prioritizes accuracy, completeness, and compliance, which are foundational to maintaining trust and integrity in financial markets. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on highlighting positive environmental outcomes without acknowledging or addressing negative impacts or challenges would be ethically unsound and potentially violate CSRC disclosure rules. Such an approach creates a misleading impression and fails to provide stakeholders with the complete picture necessary for informed decision-making. Another incorrect approach, which involves delaying the disclosure of negative environmental impacts until they become unavoidable or are discovered by external parties, demonstrates a lack of transparency and proactive risk management. This can lead to accusations of concealment and further erode trust. Finally, an approach that prioritizes cost savings over accurate impact assessment, leading to superficial or incomplete reporting, directly contravenes the spirit and letter of regulatory requirements for diligent and truthful corporate disclosures. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific disclosure obligations under Chinese law and CSRC guidelines. This involves identifying all relevant stakeholders and their information needs, conducting a comprehensive and objective assessment of the company's environmental performance, and ensuring that all disclosures are accurate, complete, and timely. A critical step is to establish internal review processes that verify the integrity of the data and the narrative presented in impact assessments and public reports. Question 17. Examination of the data shows that a key supplier for Zhejiang Chint Electrics has proposed a new partnership opportunity. During a preliminary discussion, you realize that the primary contact person from the supplier is a close personal friend with whom you have a long-standing relationship outside of work. This friend has indicated that they are eager to secure this partnership and has hinted at the possibility of preferential terms if the relationship is leveraged. What is the most appropriate course of action for you to take as an employee of Zhejiang Chint Electrics? Option A. Inform your friend that, while you value the friendship, business decisions must be made objectively, and then proceed with evaluating their proposal without any special consideration, but also without disclosing the friendship to your employer. Option B. Proceed with the business discussions, subtly guiding the conversation to ensure your friend's proposal is favorably considered, as the partnership would be beneficial for Zhejiang Chint Electrics. Option C. Immediately disclose your personal relationship to your direct supervisor and the relevant department responsible for supplier partnerships, and recuse yourself from any further discussions or decision-making related to this supplier's proposal. Option D. Continue with the business discussions as normal, assuming your personal relationship will not influence your professional judgment, and do not inform anyone at Zhejiang Chint Electrics about your friendship. The correct answer is C. Immediately disclose your personal relationship to your direct supervisor and the relevant department responsible for supplier partnerships, and recuse yourself from any further discussions or decision-making related to this supplier's proposal. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Zhejiang Chint Electrics employee due to the potential for conflicts of interest and the need to uphold the company's reputation and adherence to relevant Chinese regulations concerning business conduct and fair competition. The employee must navigate a situation where personal relationships could influence business decisions, potentially leading to unfair advantages or the appearance of impropriety. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all actions align with the company's ethical standards and legal obligations. The correct approach involves transparently disclosing the personal relationship to the appropriate management within Zhejiang Chint Electrics and recusing oneself from any decision-making processes that could be influenced by this relationship. This aligns with principles of good corporate governance and ethical conduct, which are implicitly or explicitly governed by Chinese laws and regulations, such as those pertaining to anti-unfair competition and business ethics. By disclosing and recusing, the employee demonstrates integrity and ensures that decisions are made objectively, safeguarding Zhejiang Chint Electrics from potential legal repercussions or reputational damage. An incorrect approach of proceeding with the business discussion without disclosure risks violating principles of fair competition and could be seen as an attempt to leverage a personal connection for business gain, which is contrary to ethical business practices and potentially contravenes regulations aimed at preventing monopolistic practices or unfair advantages. Another incorrect approach of attempting to subtly influence the decision in favor of the acquaintance, even without direct financial gain, is a breach of professional duty and trust, undermining the integrity of Zhejiang Chint Electric's procurement or partnership processes. Finally, ignoring the situation and hoping it resolves itself is a failure to act responsibly and proactively, leaving the company vulnerable to ethical breaches and potential regulatory scrutiny. Professionals in similar situations should adopt a framework that prioritizes transparency, objectivity, and adherence to company policy and relevant laws. This involves recognizing potential conflicts of interest early, understanding the company's internal policies on disclosure and conflict resolution, and seeking guidance from supervisors or compliance departments. The decision-making process should always lean towards actions that protect the company's integrity and reputation, even if it means foregoing a potentially beneficial business opportunity or facing a temporary inconvenience. Question 18. Assessment of how a Zhejiang Chint Electric's project manager should proceed when they become aware of preliminary, non-public discussions regarding a potential acquisition of a key supplier that could significantly impact Zhejiang Chint Electric's future operations and profitability. Option A. Immediately inform senior management and the legal/compliance department to initiate a formal materiality assessment and determine the appropriate disclosure timeline according to CSRC regulations. Option B. Share the information with trusted colleagues within Zhejiang Chint Electrics to gauge their opinions on the potential impact before escalating it. Option C. Wait for the acquisition to be finalized and publicly announced by the supplier before reporting the discussions to Zhejiang Chint Electric's management. Option D. Discreetly gather more information from the supplier to confirm the acquisition's likelihood before reporting it internally to avoid causing unnecessary alarm. The correct answer is A. Immediately inform senior management and the legal/compliance department to initiate a formal materiality assessment and determine the appropriate disclosure timeline according to CSRC regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Zhejiang Chint Electric's employee because it requires balancing the company's immediate financial interests with the ethical and regulatory obligations concerning the disclosure of material information. The core difficulty lies in determining what constitutes material information and when it must be disclosed to the public, particularly in the context of a potential acquisition. Misjudging this can lead to insider trading violations, market manipulation, or damage to the company's reputation and shareholder trust. The correct approach involves a thorough and documented assessment of the information's materiality and the applicable disclosure timelines under Chinese securities regulations. This means consulting with legal and compliance departments to understand the specific requirements for announcing significant corporate events. The justification for this approach is rooted in the principles of fair disclosure and market integrity mandated by the China Securities Regulatory Commission, CSRC, and relevant stock exchange rules. Prompt and accurate disclosure prevents information asymmetry, protects investors, and ensures a level playing field. An incorrect approach would be to withhold the information based on a subjective assessment of its impact, or to disclose it prematurely without proper verification and regulatory clearance. This could lead to accusations of market manipulation, or providing an unfair advantage to certain parties. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on informal channels or personal judgment without engaging the designated internal compliance and legal functions. This bypasses established procedures designed to ensure regulatory adherence and can result in significant legal and financial penalties for both the individual and Zhejiang Chint Electrics. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Identifying potential material information. 2. Consulting internal legal and compliance experts immediately. 3. documenting all assessments and decisions. 4. Adhering strictly to the disclosure timelines and procedures stipulated by the CSRC and relevant stock exchanges. 5. Acting with integrity and prioritizing the interests of all stakeholders, not just immediate financial gains. Question 19. Which approach would be most appropriate for a Zhejiang Chint Electric's employee to assess the potential market impact of a new product launch, considering regulatory compliance and ethical considerations? Option A. Reviewing social media sentiment and online forums for anecdotal evidence of competitor product reception and customer dissatisfaction. Option B. Engaging in informal discussions with suppliers and distributors to gauge their knowledge of competitor product pipelines and pricing adjustments. Option C. Analyzing internal sales data and conducting market research using only publicly accessible economic indicators and industry publications. Option D. Gathering insights from industry conferences and publicly available competitor reports to forecast market share shifts and competitor responses. The correct answer is D. Gathering insights from industry conferences and publicly available competitor reports to forecast market share shifts and competitor responses. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Zhejiang Chint Electric's employee tasked with assessing the impact of a new product launch on existing market share and competitor strategies. The challenge lies in balancing the need for comprehensive data gathering with the ethical and regulatory obligations to avoid insider trading or market manipulation. Accurate impact assessment is crucial for strategic decision-making, but the methods employed must strictly adhere to the regulatory framework governing financial markets and corporate conduct in China, as applicable to Zhejiang Chint Electrics. The correct approach involves a systematic and data-driven analysis that relies on publicly available information and internal, non-public information that is properly managed and disseminated according to internal policies and relevant regulations. This approach prioritizes objective assessment and avoids any actions that could be construed as unfair market advantage or disclosure of material non-public information. Specifically, it would involve analyzing market trends, competitor product offerings, customer feedback, and economic indicators, while ensuring that any internal projections or analyses are handled with strict confidentiality and are not leaked to external parties before official disclosure. This aligns with the principles of fair competition and market integrity, which are fundamental to the regulatory environment in which Zhejiang Chint Electrics operates. An incorrect approach would be to rely heavily on informal discussions with industry contacts, who may possess non-public information about competitors' upcoming product launches or pricing strategies. This could lead to decisions based on potentially misleading or illegally obtained information, violating regulations against insider trading and market manipulation. Another incorrect approach would be to prematurely share internal sales forecasts or strategic plans with external stakeholders, such as potential investors or partners, before they have been officially announced or are publicly available. This constitutes a breach of confidentiality and could create an unfair advantage, contravening regulatory requirements for equal access to information. A third incorrect approach would be to base the impact assessment solely on anecdotal evidence or rumors circulating within the company or industry, without rigorous verification or data analysis. This lacks professional diligence and can lead to flawed strategic decisions. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that emphasizes due diligence, adherence to internal policies, and strict compliance with all applicable laws and regulations. This involves seeking information through legitimate channels, verifying data sources, and maintaining strict confidentiality regarding material non-public information. When in doubt, consulting with legal or compliance departments is essential to ensure that all actions are ethically sound and legally compliant. Question 20. Implementation of a new product recall for a critical component manufactured by Zhejiang Chint Electrics has become public knowledge due to early media leaks. What is the most appropriate immediate response for Zhejiang Chint Electrics to manage this situation in accordance with Chinese regulatory frameworks governing listed companies? Option A. Issue a comprehensive public statement detailing the recall, the reasons for it, the steps being taken to address the issue, and the expected impact on the company, while simultaneously engaging with relevant regulatory bodies. Option B. Instruct all employees to refrain from discussing the recall with anyone outside the company and wait for the media frenzy to subside before releasing any information. Option C. Issue a brief statement acknowledging a minor operational issue and promise further details once an internal investigation is complete to avoid causing undue alarm. Option D. Focus all communication efforts on highlighting the company's overall strong performance in other product lines to divert attention from the recall. The correct answer is A. Issue a comprehensive public statement detailing the recall, the reasons for it, the steps being taken to address the issue, and the expected impact on the company, while simultaneously engaging with relevant regulatory bodies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Zhejiang Chint Electrics, as a publicly listed company, must adhere to stringent disclosure requirements and maintain market integrity. The pressure to manage public perception while complying with regulations necessitates a balanced and transparent approach. Mismanaging this situation could lead to regulatory penalties, damage to the company's reputation, and loss of investor confidence. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent communication strategy that aligns with the Zhejiang Chint Electric's disclosure obligations under relevant Chinese securities laws and stock exchange rules. This approach prioritizes timely and accurate information dissemination to the market, ensuring all stakeholders are informed of material developments. It demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical business conduct, fostering trust and stability. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on damage control without full disclosure risks violating regulations that mandate the reporting of significant events. This could be interpreted as an attempt to mislead the market, leading to investigations and sanctions. Another incorrect approach that delays or omits crucial information, even with the intention of presenting a more favorable narrative later, undermines the principle of fair disclosure and can result in severe penalties for market manipulation or insider trading if not handled carefully. Third incorrect approach that relies on speculation or unverified information to fill the communication void is also professionally unacceptable, as it introduces further uncertainty and potential for misinformation, which is contrary to the principles of accurate and timely disclosure expected of listed entities. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the materiality of the event. This should be followed by a thorough review of applicable Chinese securities laws, stock exchange listing rules, and internal company policies regarding disclosure. Consultation with legal and compliance departments is crucial to ensure all communications are accurate, complete, and timely. The ultimate goal is to balance the need for transparency with the protection of the company's legitimate business interests, always prioritizing regulatory compliance and ethical standards.